Hello, everybody. Away we go once again. Welcome to The Good, the Bad and the Rugby with me, Alex Payne. I'm not quite sure how it's happened, but over the last few months, we've all been on a bit of an emotional roller coaster as far as this show is concerned. We do love a good story. We do love ourselves getting involved with the big topics of the moment, and that is absolutely where we find ourselves this week in the main. That is because of the news that broke just a few days ago around concussion in rugby. And the big headline, obviously, here in the UK centres around Steve Thompson, who won the World Cup alongside Tins in 2003, and the fact that the big man has been diagnosed with early onset dementia and is joining a group of 8 former players in a potentially landmark legal action for the sport. They are proposing to bring legal proceedings against World Rugby, the RFU, and the Welsh Rugby Union over what they claim is their failure to protect them from the risks caused by concussions. Tins is here, and I'm delighted to say that so too is Jamie Cudmore, who played in 4 World Cups with Canada and will be familiar to anybody who knows the hard men of rugby. Not only 4 World Cups with Canada, 11 years at Claremont, where he won the top 14 back in 2010, and I'm very sad that we're sort of starting with this, Jamie, because there are so many avenues to go down with you. But you also are here because you suffered multiple concussions throughout your career. I suppose just before we get into the heavy stuff, how are you first and foremost, Jamie? Where are you on planet Earth? How is life? How's 2020 been?
Thanks, Alex. I'm on the West Coast in Victoria, on the West Coast of Canada. So hence why I've got sun right now and you guys are in the dark. But, things are good. I've taken a role as a forwards coach for the Canadian national team. And I also run our development academy week to week. So, all things considered, I'm in a good place and, happy to be home, closer to family for now, as the last 20 years being in Europe was a little difficult on the family connection side of things. But, home and happy to keep building and making rugby better here in Canada.
Still loving your wine, hopefully. You still loving your wine?
Oh, yeah.
Is it Sin Bin wines you've got?
The Sin Bin wine, and then we had the Blood Brothers, which was our second cuvée, as it were. And we no longer do that. We still have the winery that still does the Blood Brothers, but we sold that concept when we moved back to Canada. I
still remember you giving, was it Paul O'Connell who you gave a bottle to after your infamous dance on the dance floor? Well, I can't remember, tell us the story of that, and we are going to get into that stuff, but tell us the story of that, the tango.
Oh, well, that's just a bit of fun between 2 big men, like in Canada, we call it 5 for fighting. So if you have 5 for fighting, it means both of you go. So there's no real, penalty on the team. Unfortunately, on that time, I got the red card and he got the yellow, which I don't think was too fair. But at the same time, if you punch the golden boy in the mouth up in Munster, well, you're probably going to come off second best when the ref gives you the card, right? So a few years later, we had a game Munster against Claremont in Claremont, and I thought it fitting to one, get a bit of PR for the wine, and 2, just share a drink after the game where I had the red card, which was our red, and I gave Paul the yellow card, our Chardonnay, as a bit of a thank you and a bit of a tongue-in-cheek hit out at what we'd gone through in 2008.
Paulie's got Chardonnay written all over him.
My wife that does the marketing and all that on that side, so she's very happy with that one.
I can imagine. And just very quickly on Canada, obviously, having watched or caught up with the World Cup pool draw, America 1, America 2, where are you pinning your flag at this point?
Well, I think we need to be, pretty careful as where we put our flag now. We're in a fully development area right now where we've got a lot of new young players coming through, and if we can mix them well with our established professionals who are in Europe or in Southern Hemisphere, I think we could hope to get to that America's 1, which is kind of where normally when I was playing we would come to. Last World Cup we had to go through the repechage, so it's not looking too good if you look at the last cycle. But we've got to shoot for the stars and try to get that America's 1 qualification over the next 2 years. And try to mix it up with the big boys in 2023.
We shall be watching with great interest, and we'll obviously talk all things World Cup 2023 in due course. But given that we've got you here, Jamie, we want to get sort of stuck into the big topic of the moment. And it's such a shame to be doing this, given the fact that Christmas is around the corner and there were glimpses of escaping COVID. But can I just start by asking you both, actually, Jamie, first of all, in simple terms, do you know how many concussions you had throughout the course of your career?
For me, no.
Would you hazard a guess?
Hazard a guess, well over, probably 20, 30. You look at, like, for myself, growing up in the West Coast, where you're always, you're fighting, you're crashing skiing, you're falling off your bike, all the fights we had as teenagers. And then you go into where I used to amateur box, and, quite a few street fights as a kid, and then into, I was a competitive ski racer as a youngster as well. So had some pretty big crashes there. And then the boxing, and then you add in the rugby, where, to be fair, lower level rugby in Canada was more an organized, reason to fight, and throw the ball around a little bit. And then have a few beers at the end of the day. And then going into professional rugby after that, and there's a few knocks there, not only the knocks in games, but obviously the knocks in training, week in, week out. And so I'd say there's quite a few.
Right. I'm not sure you're the ideal guest for this, given we're talking about concussion just within rugby. It seems like there's quite a lot of this that might necessarily fall under sort of misbehaviour. Just to separate the two out, therefore, how do you look now at what you have been through in terms of concussion? Do you shrug and say, well, it's part of the rough and tumble? Or do you differentiate between those that were perhaps sort of, self-inflicted and those that were done in the line of professional rugby?
I definitely differentiate the ones where, there was protocols in place and they weren't adhered to then the ones before where, we didn't have the data, didn't have the knowledge that I now have now. So it was difficult, because when you're a youngster, everybody, you go, oh, you rub some dirt on it because you're a tough kid, because you don't know any better. Whereas now we know a lot more, and I think you can make educated decisions around head injuries. Whereas in the past, that wasn't the case.
Okay. Tins, do you know how many concussions you had?
I don't think I wasn't ever out cold in terms of being found on the pitch out cold. I would say that I had a big concussion when I was young, before rugby, and then two where they talk about that blinding light. I can remember two distinctly where I've been told by the doctor afterwards to watch what I'm doing, not go out, just go lie down, sleep. And then one other which wasn't as bad. But apart from that, I've been pretty lucky. What they talk about now is I would have definitely had to come off for a fair few HIAs, but I suppose that's quite easy now. But ones where they would probably maybe come off and not go back on now. I would have had 4 or 5 of those probably in the past as well.
Which is very interesting, the fact that you've had them but sort of danced through them, as it were. Jamie, can I ask you, I don't know whether there's a specific concussion, but what did concussion feel like for you? What were the worst instances that you had in terms of concussive episodes?
I'd say the worst instance was definitely in the semi-final and the final in European Cup in 2015. After the first one, I was, very groggy, very, difficult to kind of wake up and have any clarity, into the 2 weeks after the final, where I didn't sleep for 10 days. I was an absolute menace at home. I couldn't deal with any light, any sound. My kids coming to the room, jumping on daddy, which is kind of normal fare for anybody in the family, but I just couldn't deal with it because it was just too much movement and noise. Really, really struggled for about a month and a half, 2 months with, symptoms like that. It was pretty scary, to be honest.
And then what happened in the final?
So in the semi-final, I had an HIA. Billy Vunipola and I came into the ruck at the same time, same speed, same height, kind of like two rams, just button heads. And then I was taken off for HIA and for blood. And then told by the doctor that I wasn't able to come back on the field. Ended up taking my boots off. I was quite upset because obviously I want to be involved in the semifinal. And then the doctor ended up coming back 5 minutes later saying my other second row partner was injured. Can you come back on the field? And this is kind of my second chance. Yes. Okay, let's go. Finish the game. Don't remember much from the game. Won the game. So obviously everybody's very happy, but I just couldn't get excited. I kind of nursed a beer in the bus on the way home and never even finished it because I just didn't feel like celebrating, even though, we're in a final in 2 weeks' time. So I had a graduated return to play in those 2 weeks leading up to the game, where I only trained 3 times. Spent most of my time with a neurologist at the hospital with the team doctor. Everybody kind of pushing to get me fit for the game, myself included, because you want to be involved in the game. And then playing in the final, first tackle I made, I got put on my ass, which was pretty bizarre for me, where I was normally I'm giving a lot more than I'm receiving. But that was it. It was just the shock on my shoulder was enough to scramble my head, and I went off on another HIA. I was deemed okay to returned, and then had another head-on-head in 6th, 7th minute where I got cut open. Was taken off for blood, and while I was in the change room, I started vomiting in the garbage can in the change room while I was getting stitched up. And as you know, when you vomit, normally you get that rush of adrenaline, and I was fired up, want to get back on the field. The doctor didn't really want to let me back out, but I was quite adamant, and I think team wanted me back out there, so I was allowed to go back on the field. And then that started, that 10-day no sleep and a lot of bad symptoms for the month and a half after that. And it was put me in a pretty dark place.
Wow. There's a fair amount to pick up on off the back of that. How did you reflect on that episode in the sort of 1 month, 6 month, year after it? And how do you look back now? Because would this have been, 2014? 15. So how do you look back 5 years on? How's your progress, I suppose, developed in terms of the way you look back on it?
Yeah, so I look back at it with I'm pretty upset that myself, I didn't understand enough around the problem, and I should have been a bit more proactive in my own decisions on coming back to play. Because in the month and a half after, even though my symptoms were starting to go away, I was still trying to get fit so that I could play in the finals. That's the top 14 semifinal and final. I wasn't able to get fit because I was still suffering symptoms, even though that I had a few trainings, and just even playing touch with guys coming up and tagging guys, I just couldn't deal with it. So I did a lot of research around it. Talked with a lot of friends over here in North America, guys who play mostly NHL, where their protocols have advanced a lot faster than rugby, especially rugby in France. And I realized that I shouldn't have been out on the field playing, especially after the semifinal, and then definitely in the final to come back on twice. And then there was anger, obviously, with the medical staff and the coaching staff, where we had some pretty hard one-to-ones, where why was I allowed to go back on even though I didn't pass the HIA? And things got pretty heated between me and the club. And then that's when emotion got involved, and next thing you know, we're doing a legal process. So it was pretty tough times because as you said, I was at the club for 11 years, and no way, shape, or form did I ever want to attack the club. But with the treatment that I had during that time, and the fact that the club were basically denying everything that had happened, that's kind of why things went downhill, and the legal avenue was chosen.
That's a really difficult time because 2015, obviously, the HIA had just come in. So do you look back and judge yourself for not, your doctor, even though, and this is a French doctor, so they generally do whatever the coaches say anyway, but even with him saying, look, don't go on, but you wanting to go back on, do you look back at yourself, or do you look more back at him and go, well, you should be telling me I can't go on, you should be telling the the coaches that I can't go on, not because that's the problem with rugby. Every player wants to continue. So when you look back, is it a mixture of both? I should have known better, but he should have definitely made sure that I knew better.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixture of both, Mike. I know now. I think that's where the biggest amount of work needs to be done, I think, is around the education of this problem, so that we can be proactive around it. Because like you said, all the players want to keep going, but you need some pretty strong medical staff to be able to say, no, you've got a suspected concussion. You need to be taken out of the field of play. So yeah, it was a difficult time because, I don't think there was that much info out there, especially for guys playing. I saw more stuff from the players' representatives around, gambling on rugby as opposed to, head injury, dangers and, the information around that. So, it was a difficult situation for sure.
Can I ask you, Jamie, and I completely understand if you don't want to go there, but what was the outcome of your legal case? I remember you being very vociferous about this subject matter about 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was. Where did you net out in your court case?
So it's not finished. It's still going. What originally happened is in France, in the legal system, the judge will appoint an expert in the field of whatever the problem is. So in this case, it's a neurologist. So the court appoints a neurologist to look at the case and decide whether it has merits to actually go to trial. Expertise normally takes about 3 months. Ours took about 11 and a half. The expert asked for another expert to help him, assist him in the process because it was so complex. At the end of that process, I was found to have reason. So, we won that first step, and then it's now moved into civil proceeding against the club, but that's still ongoing.
So when the news broke this week and you saw Steve Thompson, a World Cup winner, come out and say, you see us lifting the World Cup, these are Steve's words, you see us lifting the World Cup and I can see me there jumping around, but I can't remember it. Or you hear Alex Popham, former Wales back rower, saying, we knew our bodies would be in bits. We had no clue our brains were. Jamie, what were your thoughts and your reaction when you heard that this week?
Well, to be fair, I'd known about this for quite a while. I've been speaking with Alex and some other guys that are involved in the case. And, I knew it was coming down the pipeline. But, it's always shocking to actually see it in print and see it out there. Because, it kind of hits home with, my situation and, what other guys have gone through as well. So it's obviously concerning, especially seeing, the early onset dementia, and the guys that are, going to be carrying, problems, for the future for them. Like, you can understand a bad shoulder or a gammy back or whatever it may be. But, those top 2 inches when they're injured, it's that affects everything that you do.
It's really interesting, Mike. I just want to dive in because it is worth mentioning that it's not just the men's game in which this is becoming a hot topic. And those of you who read your newspapers over here in the UK will know that we've had quite a few very high-profile female international rugby players who've also been talking this week about their experiences, and it's a real pleasure to have with us. I'm hoping we can bring her in at this point. Kat Merchant, who played 58 times for England. She won the World Cup in 2014 in that extraordinary final in Paris against Canada. But also, and actually I didn't know this, Kat, and I'm embarrassed to say that, I didn't know that you had to retire from the game after suffering at least 11 concussions in a 14-year career. Welcome to The Good, the Bad, the Rugby. And I know, sadly, we're a bit tight for time with you because you've got far better and far more interesting things to be doing than chatting rubbish with us. But it's lovely to have you on. And we've got Jamie aboard, who you'll know well, and Mike likewise. How are you, Kat? And first of all, how has the last week been? Because there've been some big old headlines around your career, and yet there's been some really prominent articles written about you in the last week or so. I wonder how that sort of roller coaster has been.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that, a bit of a roller coaster. I've had a lot of friends and players I played alongside reach out, kind of asking if I'm all right about the impact of it all. And to be honest, I feel sad for the guys, but I've not let it kind of sink in for me yet and wonder what it means for me. I've just kind of pushed it kind of back a little bit. But it does kind of force you to think about your own future and have concerns about it.
Did the story come to you this week, or did you go to the story? I'm just interested as to, how these things have unfolded for you.
Oh, I've had various media requests, kind of, because I think in terms of the women's game, there aren't that many players that have had to retire through concussion. So I think a lot of people kind of saw that and asked. And so I got asked to do the Telegraph piece, which was really good. And I really like getting my story out there as well, because I do also get players that come to me and kind of ask a little bit for advice and things, which is nice to kind of try and help them through and to just kind of explain what might feel normal or what they can expect when they're going through it.
And we were just talking to Jamie about some of the experiences that he had, with concussion. Can I ask you what symptoms you went through, what episodes, you had to endure, and I suppose how you're at with it all now?
Yeah, so basically I'd say mine got progressively worse. The first few, I think I had about 6 full knockout ones, losing consciousness. And the last one I had convulsions, and I had the whole fencer's response. So I was like choking on my gum shield. So it was all very scary for people around me, not for me, because obviously I have no memory of it.
When was that?
That was 2013. So quite close to the World Cup. So after the Sevens World Cup and before the 15s one. So that was my worry, was just about getting back. And it took 4 months to recover from that. So I missed the autumn internationals and my first game back actually was the Six Nations. So I didn't play any club, just had to jump kind of straight in. And it was 4 months of basically just lights being too bright. Like I physically would have to cower away from them. Noises obviously would just be really bad too. And I felt, the way to describe it was, I felt like I was on a ferry. So you just feel like you're constantly like off center all the time. So I was still working, so I was still personal training, and I'd say the wrong name. And at rugby coaching, I'd kind of really struggled to find my words. And it was just loads of headaches, and you start to get to the point after 4 months, you're just like, is this forever now? Do I ever recover from this? But managed to, luckily, and I got back in time for World Cup. But I think since then, I try to explain it to people, I think I've just got a reduced cognitive load. So I can still go and do everything, but I know that if I have to have a day of, say, when I do the commentary and things like that, the day afterwards, I need to book in like quite a chilled day, because otherwise I'm just going to have a migraine, or, I'm going to be a bit like slower, like with my thought processes and things. So I just say it takes a lot more planning to be able to do anything, but doesn't stop me from things at the minute.
So how do you reconcile that with life now? I mean, what do you feel about the glory that you achieved with England? And actually, Jamie was saying before we started recording, you were actually at that game, weren't you, in with your daughter in 2014? Jamie was in the stands there, obviously, as you beat Canada. But Kat, how do you match up the glory you achieved with the consequences that you seemingly have had to endure off the back of it?
Well, that's the really difficult one, because I think people ask, if you could do it again, would you? And for me at this point, it's definitely a yes. But kind of the older you get and the more that you might want to have a family and, you things like that, that's when you start to think, like somebody said, oh, well, what's the point of winning a World Cup if you don't remember it? And things like that. So, but I think at the time, you just don't really think about it at all. And it's only now, retrospectively, you kind of look back and think of the what ifs. But I think for me, had my career have been now, I probably wouldn't have been allowed to play in that World Cup. So in some ways, I'm quite lucky that I managed to, have 11 concussions and still managed to go to one. But now I think they'd just be a lot stricter, and they'd just be like, oh no, you'll have to retire earlier.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying as a sort of layman who sits and watches these things. You mentioned the fact, obviously, you commentate now, etc. I mean, are there other aspects of your life where, what you have endured off the back of rugby get in the way or not? Or are you quite good at managing the process, I suppose?
I think it's that I manage it. I mean, there are certain things. So when we went to Spotty, when we won the team award, obviously it's really bright lights, it's really loud, and I got a bad migraine and threw up. And then and I went to watch Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night, and same thing, it's flashing lights, loud noises, and those type of things now trigger migraines for me, which obviously I didn't before. So I just have to factor that into if I'm going to go out to something where I know, like, not a problem with COVID, but a friend's birthday party a while ago, she had like a mini festival inside, and I just had to stand outside for half of it just to get away from the noise. But I wanted to be there to be with her on a birthday and things. So I think socially it can impact as well, because then you start to worry that you don't want to miss out on things, but also you I don't want to put myself in the position where I'm away, get a migraine, and like can't get back and that.
Were there times? Sorry, Alex. Were there times going through that? You get to 5 concussions. Did you sort of have the conversation with yourself, or more importantly, did the doctor, the England ladies' doctor, have a conversation with you about, is it worth it going on? And then did they always put it in your court, or did they sort of suggest any other?
To be honest, it wasn't really discussed until the 10th and 11th one. It just didn't really. I don't even think I'd properly sat down and realised how many. And I think it was only when somebody actually said, so I think it was 2012, I got one in an England game. And then they were like, oh, let's go through your concussion history. And then when I was talking through it, I was like, got knocked out this game, this one, this one, this one. I was like, oh, actually, okay, now that's looking. And I asked how many is too many. And they said there's no number. So it was very much more on me. And it was only because in the World Cup, someone brushed past me in a ruck, literally just brushed past me, and I saw stars. And I'd signed a professional sevens contract, and I just thought, I'm going to get hundreds of these if I go and play sevens, these like little mini knocks and stuff in training. And it was at that moment I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it, just because of the volume of concussions you'd receive, rather than, because I mean, 11 is a lot, but spread out over my career, they were never like back to back particularly. It was, so it didn't feel like that many, if that makes sense.
Jamie, you're nodding at all of this. I mean, does all of this ring true now? Because what I haven't asked you is what your symptoms are like nowadays.
It totally rings true with me. And it's interesting. Kat talks about having, that many over a certain period of time. I think if you're able to recover properly from head injuries, you can keep playing. And like she said, there's no number that says, that's the cutoff, because it could be 1 or it could be 100, depending on the person. In the work I've done with neurologists here in Canada, he said I have the perfect brain to get concussion, in that my head and my upper body structure is helped me recover well and get through all the different head knocks I've had, which is probably not a good thing to have, but I mean, being it what I was in, it's in retrospect it is. So it's difficult because back in the day there wasn't enough education around there to really understand what the dangers are, and I think that's why now people that have recently retired are kind of looking at it going, geez, man, I might have pushed it a bit too hard there, and what consequences am I going to have in the future?
Jamie, what do you have to do now in order to make sure that you're on an even keel? You mentioned about the challenges of having your kids clambering over you and that kind of thing. I mean, do you have to look after yourself now in the same way Kat talks about a down day off the back of a sort of a big day like a commentary?
Yeah, well, that definitely resonated with me in the fact that if you're ever talking with somebody, like if we were to talk here, you and I, and we had other people talking in the room, that would be really difficult for me. But, from when I stopped playing, moved directly into coaching, I had to write everything down because I didn't want to ever miss anything. And that really helped me. That's slowly going away with the work I've been doing with Dr. Howard here in Canada. Things are starting to get better, but it's kind of, you have to look at your whole life circle. Like you got to keep the stresses down, you got to limit the alcohol. You got to make sure you stay fit and healthy, good food, basically like, just try to stay as healthy as possible. And you can get through all that stuff. For me, luckily, things are getting better and better. But seeing Steve's story this week, it's clear that for a lot of people, they're still struggling with a lot of symptoms.
Richard Hill he got so many cuts on his head, and when the doctor sort of looked and he did have a scan on his head, he found that his like skull was so thick, he was basically made to just be a rhino and butt heads with people, which he did with Corny Krieger on a very regular occasion. So, some people are sort of built that way, and that's going to be this is the problem with it is you will have people who will recover and then go on and never have any symptoms going back. And the difficult thing, I think we played in an era that we have basically been the guinea pigs for professionalism. I think if you look over the last 5 years and how fast it's changed, it's caught up, it's accelerated its catch up, and it's completely changed the laws of the game and where we've gone. But unfortunately, those guys who started in late 90s and then went through the noughties are ultimately going to be the testing ground for it.
Welcome to the Tyndall Dog Clan. Good to have them with us this week as well. Kat, I wanted to ask you, we're going to hear a lot more about this, and we're hearing 70, 80, 90, 100 male rugby players are going to sort of end up in this conversation. What is your view on it from your perspective? Are you involved in this legal action? Are you watching with interest? And, you know, if the women's game joins forces, you know, how many women do you think this would apply to at this point?
I think probably more than what people know, just because it's less in the media. So actually there's probably a lot of women players' stories that are maybe similar or kind of they've had a lot of knocks and things. I think it's watching with interest, definitely. And, you know, I would be up for finding out more about like if there was more scans or if there's memory tests or if there's things like that, just to check to see where you're at, because then that would kind of give you a bit of reassurance, hopefully, that things are all okay.
Do you have access to the support that Jamie's talking about? I mean, have you gone to talk to people about the conditions that you've got?
Yeah, I did, because one of the things I suffered really badly with when post-retirement with the concussion and that was change in mood. So I got either to the point where there was no normal. I was either really angry or I was crying. There was just didn't seem to be a normal emotional response to anything. So I saw what they called, like, not occupational therapist, who really helped me kind of to control that. And it's kind of like a learning process again. And it's just kind of like, for me, it was like a traffic light system of, okay, something's annoyed you or upset you. And rather than just going wild, it's pause for a second and decide, okay, what's the warranted response? Because I think what she was saying was when you get a lot of damage to your frontal lobe, when you have lots of concussions, you kind of skip the reasoning part and you just go straight to raw kind of emotion. And so for me, was the main work on that I've been trying to do and sort of, I think I've got now.
I'm really sad you've got to run because there's so many things to talk to you about. What do you have to do?
I run boot camps, so I've got to go out in the rain and beast people. So, yeah,
well, that sounds a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Good. Give a plug, because you've got your own personal fitness business. How can people find you if people need to, post-Christmas, come and get shouted at in a field by Cat Merchant?
Oh, yeah, it's Cat14. So I've got a website, or on Instagram, I post lots of things of yoga-y handstand stuff and fun things like that. So, yeah, follow me on that, and then you can get in touch with me that way, or Twitter.
Good on you. Listen, thank you for coming to join us. I'm sorry that it's short and sweet, but we will have a proper catch-up sometime soon, hopefully about more enjoyable and smilier things than concussion. Kat, lovely to see you. Happy Christmas to all you and yours, and we'll speak again soon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, because it's not just Kat. We are seeing more and more stories coming out from the women's game at the same time. I suppose, Jamie, just reflecting on that, because we mentioned the fact that you were at that final in 2014. I mean, have you spoken to... Is it something that you've discussed with a lot of other players, this? Or is it something that you've kind of been on a bit of a lone journey with over the last few years?
Yeah, I've talked with, a lot of ex-teammates, guys I played against, all around the world. And it's it's a developing story, as, seeing this process come out this week. Other high-profile guys that are involved, and just talk mostly with ex-teammates about how are they doing, and then what do you need done in the future? Do they need support? Do they just need somebody to talk to? Because mental health is a big part of this, and just trying to educate people around the problem, because I think that's, at the end of the day, that's where we were really lacking in the advent of professionalism, is that, Mike alluded to the fact that it went so fast in the 90s and 2000s. Players got bigger, crowds got bigger, more money came in, and it just kind of was this perfect storm of trying to get, a good product out on the field. And I think, unfortunately, in certain instances, definitely around head injuries, the play probably didn't keep up with the medical data. You look at, back in the day, it used to be a 3-week stand down, and now it's a 6-day stand down. So why is that? Well, it helps the clubs, and helps the clubs use their players week in, week out, which I don't think is the best case in terms of player safety.
I just think there's quite a lot to go within this and put it all into context around. As you said, we turned professional in 96 or whatever, and I think we didn't even know how to train in those first the first, I would say, 7 years of professionalism. So let alone where the medical was. The medical was how good your physio was, really, more than anything else. Whether there was audits, injury audits, basic body audits, I don't know whether you've had. So then that is the period where I think no one really knew what they were doing. You were still in that tough man. You were in that tough man zone where you never wanted to go off. That probably continued even when they brought in the head testing that you had to take before every season. So you had to do your base level, so that if you ever did get a head knock, you had to. And players would sort of say, "Well, I'm going to quite slowly react on these, so that I know that later down the line that I've passed my baseline test." So it's that I don't think there was any sort of proper guidance. It was there, but then it grew, and I think by the time I was finishing, I felt obviously with first of all the testing in the air and health and welfare about that came in, and then I think it's gradually gone very quickly to a level where the TMO now, if he sees a head knock that's off camera, he can order that guy off the field. And I don't independent doctors in changing rooms for HIAs is massive in terms of making sure people don't go on the field. When I look at this now, I think Jamie's got a very valid point. He was in a situation with a club where they showed that they possibly didn't have his best interests at heart. Now, my only issue with the guys that are potentially suing the World Rugby RFU and the WRU is how are they going to prove that? Now, apparently there is evidence of a document. Jamie might have seen it because obviously if he's been contacted by it, but it's quite hard to not sort of expect some risks when you play rugby.
This World Rugby thing is a big Pandora's box, man, because like you said, Mike, I've seen the kind of the dossier behind it, and the data's been out there since the 70s. And when professionalism came around in the late 90s, early 2000s, things got, started going really, really quickly. And I think, the data could have kept up with the rules. But as you said, it was that perfect storm of, players getting bigger, money coming in, and a lot of different, kind of powers that be pulling in different directions. So it's a difficult situation.
And it's not just the money and the players getting bigger and the data coming on, but actually, if you look at the stats around the development of the game itself, in 1987, let's do it the other way around, actually. In 2019, there were an average of 257 tackles per game, which is 163 more per game than in 1987. So you're looking at double the number of tackles almost, in a space of 20, 30 odd years, etc. I mean, that is an extraordinary development of a sport. Mike, when you look at that and you look at everything that has developed around us within rugby union, when you're talking about this dossier, what are you alluding to? Is there a smoking gun at this in this story, or is it just about bolting all the bits together and trying to make it add up?
I don't know what the smoking gun is or whether there is one, but I spoke to Alex Popham and he suggested there is evidence out there that's going to come to light. But if you compare it to the NFL, my worry is with the whole suing process. Now, I am fully sympathise with the players that no one wants to see a mate that you've played with in the past, get early onset dementia or have any brain injury. My problem is with suing the game is if you take it NFL or whatever, who spent millions actually hiding evidence, it's a completely different ballgame. But if there is evidence to prove that for some reason World Rugby or some of those nations didn't share information or didn't act on it, I don't know whether necessarily do governing bodies always have to share it. As long as they use it and they act on it, I'd be happy. But whether that's happened or not, I don't know. But if you look at NFL, the problem is with World Rugby, we're on our arse as it is at the moment. There isn't that 750 million or whatever the NFL had to pay out back in the day for hiding all that evidence. I do sympathise. I've spoken to Alex only by WhatsApp. He did say they are setting up a foundation that's going to be there to support players who have to go through what they're going through. And I think that is the main thing I want to come out of it. I think with a big legal case, I do worry what fans of the game will think of them. If that is what I worry about, I worry that fans will then dislike them for actually, most of the parents I speak to on a Sunday morning still will send their kids to rugby. They love the game. They'll talk about technique. But as you said, 267 tackles in a game, even if they're all perfect tackles, you're still getting forces to your head. You look at Newcastle wearing the thing behind their neck, wearing what Sarries did. The data will grow, but it is always a contact sport. So I feel if you attack the sport, it won't come out in the positive way that they're possibly hoping it could.
Jamie, can I ask you what the reaction was in France when you launched your legal action, and therefore what these players should be preparing for in the face of all of this?
It was pretty emotional. And, as you know, when emotion comes into things like this, things get pretty heated on both sides. I won't tell you what the social media kind of rancor that got fired up because of this, but I don't really pay much attention to that stuff. So it was. I'd
love to have seen you go knock on people's doors who were leaving your thing. They open the door and they're like, oh shit.
Clearing up trolls one tweet at a time. You'd have had a lot of supporters in that, I can tell you.
There'd be a lot of houses knocking on doors, Mike.
But tell me about the general gist of it and how you did. I mean, did you literally just park it and put it to one side?
I don't really pay attention to that stuff. I got 2 kids at home, lovely wife, and businesses and rugby coaching now. So I'm not worried about all that peripheral stuff. But certain times there was. You had to delete a few messages or a few posts that people are sending at you. But at the end of the day, that's part and parcel of being in the public eye. Not that I condone it, but that's, you just gotta kind of push it behind you. But it was definitely difficult. I talked with Ben Kaiser on the French Rugby podcast recently. I could have kept my mouth shut and left Clermont a hero because I played for so long with guys like Aurelien and other guys that were involved in the championships in 2010. But I stood up for something that I thought was really, really wrong. Getting put through the ringer by the club in that 2-week period. On some sides, it's the emotion got into things and things kind of spilled over. But for me, I knew it was for the right reasons, and I went through it. And sure, I'm person non grata here now in Clermont, but the people that I know and love there, and their opinion of me has not changed. And at the end of the day, it's your close social circle that matters the most. Family and friends. So. I'm sweet with all them. I'm sweet with all my ex-teammates, and at the end of the day, that's all that really, really matters to me.
Did you find support from unexpected allies?
I did. I had a lot of players reach out to me, especially in the lower divisions in France, where things are pretty tough. Guys are playing federal rugby where they're working in the week and then they're playing on the weekends, and guys missing work, not being able to continue to play. Some guys that have got some serious problems, like can no longer talk properly. Major symptoms that they're still going through because they've been pushed through HIAs and continued to play. So it's worrying that this stuff in this day and age is still happening, because we talk about the data and the stuff being out there for guys to make educated decisions around protecting players, but unfortunately it's just not happening every week.
That is a difficult thing, because players, I think it's changing. I think players are realising how serious concussion is, but I don't think they paid that attention for a long time, and they didn't take control of their own situations. And, as soon as this story broke, I phoned Andy Hazel, knew he had to finish on concussion. And so this is sort of my only experience of it is, he kept getting symptomatic. He was symptomatic in training. He was symptomatic everywhere. And he sat down, had a conversation with the physio and with Dean Ryan. And Dean was like, Dean had always said to him, if there is anything wrong when it comes to your head, Dean would ask you to play if there was something wrong with your body. Don't get me wrong, he was that type of coach. He wanted to push you to the limits. But then when you turned around and said no, he never forced it. And he did that with Hazy and said, look, if your head's not right, I don't want you playing. And then Hazy had to have that conversation and then had to make that decision. And he listened to the doctor and the physio, and that's why he retired, I think, in 2014. So that's sort of been my sort of experience of it. But players now, I feel, take far more responsibility on their own heads, whereas in the past they didn't. They wanted someone to tell them that they couldn't play. And then if you're that medical guy in sat in the middle, you've got a coach who's telling you he has to play. You're probably thinking, I don't want to play. So you're going, how are you feeling? Immediate answer, yeah, I'm okay. Well, okay. I think you've just got to be careful. And obviously the player will then say he wants to play, and the coach will go, well, if you're not telling him he can't play, then he can play. And I think players won't do that now. And I think that's where the biggest change has been, is they're now far more aware of what the risks are, and hopefully that will show later.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear, because, I think Dean's got the education around it, and he understands that, I'm going to push my players to their limit, but when it comes to a head injury, well, we don't screw around with it. And I think more and more, you're right, Mike, and a lot of more guys are, they understand the risks around it. They understand that, you can't screw around with your top 2 inches, and, the player needs to be protected or protect themselves. For myself, coaching here in Canada, when I got a guy with any type of head injury, they're with the medical staff. They're basically, I can't touch them until the medical staff deem them okay to come back and do their return to play and all the rest of it. I'm the same as Dean. If the guy's injured, he's injured. You can't use him on the rugby field. And head injuries are as important to protect players around that.
Do you think, with all this, what quick fixes could be implemented, do you think, to help? Quick
fixes, make the field bigger. Not an easy fix, I know.
But no joke. I said that, they have, I've said this the other day, they have maximum size pitches, but they have a minimum, but some minimums, take Leicester Tigers, is 7 metres narrower than what a pitch can be. Whereas I think they have to make the minimum what it is now, 70 metres wide, but they could expand that to 80. Now, obviously, some stadiums won't be able to do that, but that's an easy way of creating seams rather than, all your big men running into it. I don't know what you think about this, but I think contact during training weeks. So contact should be only in pre-season. Once you get into, I don't know how you feel about this as a coach, because everyone loves that. Every coach likes a little bit of pound of flesh. But I would say minimal contract, if none, no full goo on a Tuesday, double Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mike, especially on the limited contact within the week. If I look back at my career playing in France, you play like 35, 40 games a year. The NFL's done it. They've got limited contact in trainings, if at all. And as long as you have, S&C coaches or sports scientists that are really looking at the impacts the guys are going through week in, week out, you definitely got to limit that contact to, say, a preseason block, or maybe, you got a 30-minute window every week where, guys know that they're going to be little blocks of full contact so that they can prepare for that. But it definitely needs to be adjusted for sure.
I was just actually looking when you mentioned Dean Ryan. So Dean was an analyst with us at Sky for a few years, actually, and one of the best in the business. I remember talking to him about the fact that he had epilepsy as a result of playing rugby. And I wasn't actually sure whether he'd ever gone public with it. But while you were chatting, I just Googled it. And there's an article here from December 2013 in The Guardian where Dean Ryan says, "Why I'm angry at the lack of leadership and guidance on concussion. The former star suffers from epilepsy brought on after concussion and believes the game must address the issue." So this is 7 years ago. The line I just leapt out here was, "We won the league in 1998, pipping Saracens by a point." This is when he was at Newcastle. "Although I couldn't play in the final game, which confirmed the title because of sustaining 3 concussive injuries within 10 days, which is just eye-watering. And it's not new. I think even Sir Bill Beaumont, chairman of World Rugby, retired because of concussion. I think obviously, the late, great Mervyn Davies in Wales. I mean, this has been around for a long old time. The question, Jamie, before we move it on a bit, just is, you mentioned in that episode where you got 2 in 2 weeks playing in the European run-in, the fact that you wanted to go back on. And how do you look back now on big men determined to play, desperate to get it back out there, regardless of the situation, kind of thing? How do you square that away with the decisions that aren't taken for your own benefit when you want those decisions made for your benefit?
That's obviously a very difficult one, but for myself, and I can only speak for myself here now, I understand the risks around it. I understand the risks around second impact syndrome and all the different symptoms that traumatic brain injuries can bring. So I don't mess with it. I know the dangers, so I've now adjusted my mindset around that. I think if I'd have known the dangers while playing, that's a difficult one to say because, I'm a competitor at the end of the day and you want to be on the field. But I think if the doctors were more educated and the coaches more educated, I don't think they would have thought about putting me back on. They would have just been, all right, sweet, warm up next guy and get him on the field. Well, I would hope that because, that's how I think now. It's a tough question, but I think it all comes down to understanding the problem and getting more education around it for guys to make the educated decision when it comes up. Let's
throw it forwards a little bit then, and sort of where do we go from here, kind of thing. I mean, I suppose just before we get into the nitty gritty, this lawsuit is going to be about negligence, essentially. I mean, Mike, do you think there is a case for negligence within the game of rugby union over the last 10, 15 years?
Of negligence, no. But as we've talked about, you're now bringing up cases like Dean Ryan's and saying, and Bill Beaumont. So there obviously was evidence out there, but because the game was amateur, did anyone really take it seriously? You have to also think when it was amateur, you were getting punched in the face quite a bit and you were getting kneed in the face and you were getting stamped on the head. Things that pretty quickly went out the game also. So I think that the problem with it, in my eyes, I haven't believed that there was negligence, but then I haven't had those repeated concussive blows where I've rushed myself back or had the bad symptoms. So I can't really speak for it, but I haven't seen it with other people. But obviously I was there with Lippy. I was at Bath when Michael Lippman was there. I had no idea he'd been knocked out as many times as he has been knocked out, because I think, we talk about, no egos, just amigos, and everyone, to talk to your fellow player. How have I not noticed that he's had that many concussions and actually had a word with him and go, mate, come on now, we've got to have a look at this properly. So, but then you would also ask the question, when has Lippy sat down with himself or sat down with someone and go, hang on, I'm on 15 concussions here. When do I do some serious either brain scans or research or speak to the right person and actually make the right call? So I think the game has changed quickly in the last 6 years. So I think that's a positive for it. I do believe that noughties period, we probably weren't best looked after, but I think that is through all the medical, because we were transforming, the athletes were transforming quicker than the medical side was, and the eliteness of the medical side. And if you look at the athletes now, they are proper, top end. And I think there are things we could step forward with. And if this legal case, I don't think they should do a legal case. I think it should be a massive awareness piece and a forced piece on World Rugby to change this and set something up that helps with it. You look at the NFL, it took them, they've been professional for God knows how many years, and it took them, they hid it for 40 years before they ever got sued. So, I think, and you look at football, they've been professional for 100 years, heading balls all the time, and it's taken them till a sue to move on and set out protocols for kids heading balls in schools. So I think we're ahead of the curve in that, but I think this should be something that highlights it and exposes it and makes sure that we do put things in place to protect players who put their bodies on the line for the club, which they will do professionally and amateurly, but make sure they have that support network and a process to know where to go if they feel these symptoms.
Jamie, do you think this was negligence in rugby?
I'll go back to the same party line with my situation. Yes, there was. There's negligence everywhere, unfortunately, when people do things where they're not educated around the dangers of certain problems. Do I think we need to go to a full process? I agree with Mike. I think it might be might be a whole lot of noise, and is it going to help the game in the long run? Because that's what I think we really need to do is help evolve the game as fast as possible, using data out there that's going to help us make educated decisions and make the game better, more attractive, and safer moving forward. So I agree with Mike on the education piece, and then the support for afterwards. If anybody does come down with problems like this, there needs to be avenues for them to get that support and get healthy.
I'm just reflecting, Mike, and you mentioned it already. $765 million is what the NFL paid out to over 4,500 former players in 2014 after negligence was proven to have taken place in the league. Jamie, from your perspective, and given that you've been on this road for a while now, I mean, we're hearing that the lawyer involved is saying that he's been in touch with more than 100 players from union and league who are reporting symptoms now that this is coming to light. And I think there'll probably be a few more who certainly come forward at this point. How much is this the tip of the iceberg, do you think? And where do you think this will ultimately net out in this case?
Well, I definitely think it's a tip of the iceberg, and where it's going to go, I'm not too sure. But I reiterate the point that Mike brought up, and I just finished with. We've got to educate players better. I kind of look at it as at the top level, kids are watching you every weekend, and now they're trying to bring in HIAs to kids rugby on the weekend, even though it's obviously not possible and that's not part of the rules. But the bottom does what they see up at the top, and unfortunately, professional rugby hasn't quite got it figured out yet. If they can, and then the education piece keeps going through, well, people will be able to play with a little bit more security because they'll treat these injuries as they are. They're proper injuries. There's always going to be areas where it's a bit of a gray area. You're not too sure where to go. Well, if we're talking social rugby, if we can err on the side of caution, I think we'll do a lot better. And then when we get to the professional leagues, we get independent doctors and people understanding the problem. Well, I think we're gonna evolve and make better decisions. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I definitely want to help being a part of the solution. And make the game better and brighter, because we all love the game. We want it to get better, and I don't know if this process might be shooting ourselves in the foot right now, but hopefully something good comes out of it, and we can move on.
So say all of us. Mike, you've been talking to Alex Popham. I know you've been in touch with Steve Thompson this week as well. I mean, what are you hearing from the guys at the very front of all of this?
Well, I think from Pops's point of view is he's seen all the evidence. He hasn't shared that with me, and he feels there is a case there to be had now. And I had this conversation with Lippy. I said, well, what's the end goal? I mean, and now Alex has also told me that they've set up a charity, which I was quite excited about, and he's going to do they're trying to set up, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you because he said it hasn't been secured yet, but they're trying to set up a big fundraising thing, which he asked me to get involved in, which I definitely would be, because I think it's the right thing to do. It's an educational piece, it's an awareness piece. Obviously, the charity is going to do an amazing thing, because we don't want to see our former heroes or rugby legends or whatever, icons, whatever you want to call them, going through this. So I think that's the more powerful side to put through. I'm not sure where Lippy sort of is sat with it, because when I asked him, what's your end goal? What's the evidence? He's like, I'm not really paying attention to that. So it's more, I don't know whether this is true, but it seemed more of an anger bit for him. And if you read some of the interviews that he's done, anger was, he just didn't. When I first found out, I rang him and he said that was what he couldn't understand. He was just losing his rag, as Jamie was saying. When his kids were playing with him, just losing his rag with his wife. She didn't understand why it was causing tension then between those two, and he went off. He finally went and got it sore. And if we can highlight that, and if people are feeling like that, and making sure that they can go and get themselves checked, get themselves professionally looked after, and because education and knowing that has completely changed their relationship, because she knows why he snaps now. So if you have those pieces of data as well, it can help you not fall into a deeper hole. So I'm I'm so with sort of Jamie on this in terms of the educational side. Why can't we make it compulsory that everyone wears those force monitors behind their ears? So suddenly we're collecting huge amounts of data in professional rugby. Surely we can do that. And then as long as that is implemented at World Rugby level, and we've set up a foundation, we set up a players pool that protects people, could go back into the transition pool that we always talk about in terms of making sure that people have a year when they finish rugby to try and pull their shit together and actually give them a chance, instead of falling into a hole. Then plus if this happens, you're in a deeper hole, and we just need that support network to get them out. And hopefully that is my goal. That is what I would want to come out of this, is that we have a succinct step going forward. If it helps at junior level that dads don't force their kids to carry on and stops them from just running mindlessly into bags, that's amazing in my eyes as well, because it's an educational piece that's then going up rather than not, as Jamie said, it's normally coming down the ladder. If it's then going up as they travel through their time, then the coaches in 20 years' time who are coaching minis aren't going to have them just running into bags all the time. So I think it can be a powerful, positive thing if it's done in the right way, but I'm just not sure that suing the world game is the way to go at the moment.
Jamie, nodding, shaking.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. The reason my wife and I set up our foundation off the back of this was to make positive change, and that education piece to me is so important. So that, like Mike said, kids coming through, parents coming through, they understand the dangers and they can adapt accordingly. I think if we really push that education that, a head injury is an injury like any other, but needs to be treated a lot more seriously, we'll make good decisions around that, building the game forward. And I love we don't need to be seeing kids running into bags on the weekend. Get them out there, get them play, look for space. That's the modern game. Find space and play at a high rate of speed, and kids have more fun doing that. So if we can, when we're doing contact, you're doing contact. Sure, that's you work on the technicity of it. But it's kids on Sunday, they want to be running around. Whether they throw the ball forward, whether they throw it backwards, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's a rugby ball and they're moving at a high rate of speed and they're tired at the end of the day, it helps the parents, doesn't it?
I will sign mine up for that. Just quickly, what's the website for your foundation? And I didn't know you were doing that. What does the foundation do?
Yeah, so it's Rugby Safety Network. My wife and I started that in 2016. To be fair, we haven't been able to do much being back in Canada, in that it was originally based in Switzerland, as we were just over the border. And it was a lot easier to set up a foundation there than it is in France, as France they love their paperwork there. So things were easier in Switzerland. Everything was done by internet, and then we started with the education piece in rugby schools all down the east of France. Down in the south, when we were in Aix-en-Provence, we did quite a few tournaments along the south coast, into Monaco, and just pushing that education piece around concussion. Tackle technique, talking about making sure kids are wearing mouth guards. Just simple things that a lot of people just don't even think about or don't even know, which was pretty eye opening. We did a tournament, Scène de Vote in Monaco 2 years ago, and we had different teams from around the world, and we had one team from Corsica, so in the French Federation. And I said, all right, guys, who knows what a concussion is? And none of them put their hands up. And I kind of thought, okay, well, do you guys all wear mouth guards? And only one kid put his hand up. And I said, well, so why do you wear a mouth guard and nobody else does? He goes, oh, I'm the only one that actually, my mom bought me one. Nobody else's parents bought them a mouth guard to play rugby. And this is under 12s. So it's pretty worrying. And it shows how important that education piece is, for kids moving forward.
Which is very interesting. So one of the things, Jamie, about the way we try and do this, we always try and offer a sort of a balanced view. And there is obviously a second side to this, which will be World Rugby, RFU, and the WRU as well. I'm not sure now is the time for them to say what it is that they want to say, but I just was sort of trying to preempt, I imagine, what their response will be, which will be along the lines of what we know now we didn't know then. And the societal and almost the scientific knowledge has come on in leaps and bounds. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, funny enough, that rugby was being held up against football. I think Danny Kerr 10 days ago was saying that he can't believe there aren't HIAs in the Premier League now. But when you this is going to be fought and it's going to go and go and go, of course. But is that defence of we didn't know then what we do know now valid, relevant? And I suppose also looking at it in a different way, how much progress do you think has been made on this subject matter relative to the incidents that you've been through?
I'll lead off on the last question. I think a lot of progress has been made. I think genuinely the medical staffs and the powers that be want to address this properly. But on your first point, the data has been there. The data has been there since the 70s. World Rugby, or IRB before, now World Rugby, they've had head injury symposiums for years, from the 70s, the 80s, 90s, 2000s. But it's unfortunate in the data that they've listened to and the data that they've used in adjusting the laws moving forward. I've seen the documents that the World Rugby boys this process is using, and it's pretty compelling. It's not a smoking gun, but the data's been there, and the powers that be have not listened closely enough to that data, in my opinion. So them saying that it's the data wasn't there, for me, that's not good enough, because it was there.
Wow. Okay. So that really does crystallize this very, very clearly. Mike, what is your view on that balance between, the progress that has been made and the progress that potentially wasn't taken?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, again, for me to comment, because I'm going to commentate it from my side of it, which is never having to really have dealt with it. So I would always sit on the side of, look, if 10 years down the line, if 5 years down the line, I get diagnosed with early onset, I would currently say right now, then that was a risk I was willing to take part of the game, and I would be very much like Kat, and I would say, if you go back and ask me to do it again, would I change anything? No, because I think rugby's given me more experiences, ability to expand in the way I've been able to live my life and the countries I've seen and everything else. I think it's given me more than it's taken from me. But that's not going to be the case for every player that's out there, and that's the simple fact of it. You look at Jamie's case. I'd be devastated if a club had done that to me, because. But again, I didn't experience that. So this is where it's going to sit, and this is where it's going to be debatable, because not every player is going to have had an experience like that. So you're going to get polarized. You're going to get left and right. And I think what's going to come out of it is it has to have an overhaul of how it's looked at it. I think rugby is doing a great job right now in terms of where they're trying to go. There is no mistakes. If you connect with the head, it's a red card. The players go off HIA. They pretty much have to get rigorously tested before they go back on. Sometimes they go back on, then pulled straight back off because they don't look like they're acting right or whatever. I think it's quite on it now. Now, whether it could be better, I guarantee it probably could be. But if we can then make sure that happens, then at least we're going in the right direction.
It's interesting, Jamie, when you talk a lot about education. I mean, that is one part of it, but the game itself has to be the other factor here. I mean, how would you mentioned bigger pitches, but have you got other thoughts as to what the game should be doing to ensure that these, whether it's collisions or whether it's the potential risks are minimized, or by doing that, do you remove what we all know and potentially love as rugby?
Yeah, it's a fine line, if I think it's probably unrealistic to think that we can make all the rugby pitches in the world 10 meters wider. But one thing that I was pushing for, in the early stages of this whole process was in the professional game in France to enlarge in the bench. There's two schools of thought with that. One, okay, you take the pressure off the coaching staff to keep a player on the field that's injured because you have a bigger bench. But then the other side, obviously, then you can backload your bench, and similar for South Africa, you bring in a whole new front row for the second half of the game. You know what I mean? So, that's on one side it can be beneficial, on the other side it can kind of maybe go the other way and bringing in, guys that are only good for 20 minutes. So they're, normally quite a bit bigger and heavier, just to get punched through the line towards the end of the game when other guys are probably a little bit tired because they've been playing the full 60, full 70. So, there's some changes around the bench that might help at the professional level. I think we're trying to do our best, with, like Mike said, the hits to the head, you're off, trying to do our best around, dealing with impacts within the week. So that kind of minimizes the in the week dangers, and then trying to do our best on the moment, and making, educated decisions around guys being injured on the field. It's a complex issue. I don't have the answers, but I think we just need to keep our open mind and keep trying to make things better and make educated decisions around it.
This is going to be a fascinating talking point for the next 2 years, and it is going to be emotional, and it's going to be divisive, and it's going to run and run and run. But Tins, just looking at the game that you guys played at the very highest level and that so many people love and stop to watch on Saturday, it does kind of feel like everywhere you look, there is a chasm opening up. We're talking about the quality of the rugby. We're talking about a racist incident in Argentina. We're talking about unions on the verge of bankruptcy. We're talking about clubs that are, cutting pay for the players. And just everywhere you go at the moment, there ain't a lot of joy around, is there? Is that just 2020 in a microcosm?
It's all COVID's fault. It's all COVID's fault.
Well, it's certainly not helped, I know. But what is the impact? If these players prove their case and they are successful in suing World Rugby, the RFU and WRU, the consequences of that will be what?
Well, it depends on the number. If they get an astronomical number, then it kills World Rugby. They're defunct. They've gone. And do we want that? Do these 100 players want to be possibly responsible for that? It's not the NFL where you have $1 billion sat in the bank and you can pay them out and it's not really a problem. It would cause. We're already, every union is on its ass. World Rugby is on its ass. No fans in stadiums. The game is under pressure in terms of the way it was played. The autumn wasn't that thrilling. They're always trying to change the laws to try and make it more interesting, but most of the laws that they do change don't really make it work. Whereas I think there's some far simpler things that could be done. Just widening the pitch is one, even if you only give 2 meters, and it's an extra 20 centimeters that every forward has to defend. It gives a seam for someone to run at or a pop pass to do it. It would have a catastrophic effect if they took a big sum, because it would cripple World Rugby. And then you bring out what we've been talking about in terms of Pacific Island rugby. If you kill World Rugby, they're definitely dead. What are they doing? It's on a real knife edge, our sport at the moment, in terms of what it is. There's such a hard following, but we want to expand and get more people in. We want an exciting brand of rugby, so we're trying to make that happen. And I think there's got to be some stabilising factors somewhere within there where we can just get back on track. Really, it's getting rocked at the moment, isn't it?
I want to try and find a positive from both of you before we wrap this up. It is Christmas around the corner. But Jamie, just I suppose with you finally, where does your needle flicker between love and hate with rugby?
I love rugby. I love it. It's as Mike said, it's opened so many doors for me to go around the world and play professionally, because growing up, I didn't even know professional rugby existed. Playing rugby on the West Coast here, where, we used to change in the back of our truck and go out on the field and play a bit, and then have a few beers after. In third division in Squamish, where I grew up, like never in a million years I think I'd be going to Europe and playing and making a living, and have a great time doing it. So I hope if this process continues on, that there's a measured response to it, so that, like Mike said, it doesn't kill the game. Because Pacifica, they need that money. So do we here in Canada. So if World Rugby goes down, a lot of Tier 2 nations would cease to exist. So there's a lot riding on this, and I hope there's a measured response, as I said. because, I love the game. I want it to get better, and I want to help do that, in my role here in Canada with our academy, and, be positive around, making rugby better. And, talking about this and working on that education piece, I think will go a long way to help the game continue to grow. But at the end of the day, let's not shoot ourselves in the feet while we're trying to do that.
We sort of seem to be saying this on a weekly basis, but I think, we're definitely sort of drawing towards the end of this one. Let's hope somehow, and I don't quite know where it's going to come from, but that good is the outcome from this process. Certainly, I just huge sympathy for the players themselves. It's a desperate situation to be in, and fundamentally, I hope that is the sentiment that everyone kind of feels and leans towards in this story. To try and finish on a positive, I'm not quite sure how you go and find a positive in this, but Jamie, I suppose one thing that you're looking forward to, rugby related, in 2021, if I could give you a wish or something that you are clinging to that makes you smile about the game right now, what would it be?
Well, for us here in Canada, we've got some games lined up this summer. Let's hope they can all go off, and that helps us in our preparation for Rugby World Cup 2023 qualification. Let's see if we can get in that Pool A and have a shot at some of the bigwigs in World Rugby, because I think Canada as a nation, we've slid over the last 10, 15 years, and I don't think it's a good picture of where we're at. We need to start. We need to pull our sleeves up and start working a little bit harder so that we can start climbing back up the rankings. Because I'd like to see us over the next World Cup cycle try to get into the mid-teens and keep pushing forward. But we need games for that. So if World Rugby can send us a few more games, by all means, we'll take them, and we'll keep building.
Something to look forward to, and something for the wish list as well. I'd love to see Canada go toe-to-toe with the All Blacks. I think it was 91, wasn't it? Al Sharon, Norm Hadley, Gareth Rees. What a great day that was, almost. Tins, final word to you. What do we need? How are we going to get bigger grins on rugby supporters' faces in 2021?
Look, I think there is, the amount of stuff I've seen on the World Cup draw today and how many people are talking about it. But then also, for me, the Lions, if ever you need a successful Lions tour, it's this year, 2021, to bring it all back. Hopefully that leads in with a great Six Nations. But then if the Lions goes off and we have an epic test series and an epic, 9-game tour or whatever it is now, 6-game tour, I think, that makes everyone feel better about themselves. I think it's one of those it's a global icon, the British and Irish Lions, that I'm sure Jamie watched. I saw people in America watch, people in Canada watch, people all around the world want to watch and wish they could be a part of. And I think if we can have a cracking series there, that can really help rugby in 2021.
Fingers crossed. Jamie, there are so many other things I'd love to talk to you about. Can we book in for a second episode where we talk about the backstory, which we got a glimpse of, but hopefully it's peace, not war nowadays. X-Men, Simbin Wines. I mean, there's so many places to go. Will you come and have another dance with us sometime?
By all means. We can even go into the last time Mike and I went skiing. You
don't want to be anywhere near this man with skiing. He is an unbelievable skier, by the way. Obviously, skied for Canada, like at schools or at uni level. Literally, when you see a 120 kilo man going down the slopes at that speed, you worry for, you think of the ski snakes and the little kids. Any of those kids go the way, they would just be disintegrated. It's incredible to watch a big man who can ski that well. But obviously that was after we were playing snow rugby, which led to a lot of good nights out and a lot of good times.
I dread to think. Are you like a human avalanche on Salomons? Is that how we describe you? And are you moguls? Are you? What are you? Little blacks? Where do you go in terms of the runs that you like running up and down?
I like the big open spaces. I used to have an Austrian coach when I was a youngster, and he didn't teach us to turn. He taught us how to follow the mountain. So you can imagine the speed that you get when all you do is follow the mountain. And I always held on to that when I skied. You just follow the mountain.
You should definitely tell the story of when you broke what was it you broke at the top of the mountain and your mate had gone and everything was shut.
Oh, I broke my shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so long story short, I was a 16-year-old. I was 15 at the time. We had just finished a training day, and a buddy of mine went all the way up to the top of the mountain, sat down, and just kind of let everybody go off the snowfield. So we're at the top of Blackcomb, Whistler, one of the biggest stations here in the West Coast, and we just kind of sat up there and saw the sun starting to go down, and it was beautiful. So anyway, we went and we were doing a Chinese downhill to get to the bottom, which is basically you try to make your buddy fall over, and you're kind of throwing snow at each other as you're racing down the glacier to get to the bottom as fast as you can. He got me good. He got his pole between my legs, put me over the handlebars. So I get up, I got snow on my goggles and this, that, and the other. So I kind of managed to clean myself up, and I'm pinning it down to the bottom of the glacier, because the bottom of the glacier is quite flat. You need quite a lot of speed to get out of the glacier and then down to the bottom of the hill. And I remembered that there was an access road. I wasn't sure if you came up onto the access road or you came from above down below. And I made the wrong decision. I went below to come up, and I went right through a rock garden and about not a big drop off, maybe 2 meters drop off, 1.5 meters. So I hit the rocks, out of the skis, head over heels, and I landed on my shoulder, between my shoulder and my pack sack, and my shoulder got snapped forward, and I broke the growth plate. Anyway, I lying there in a heap and screaming and crying because it hurts like hell. Don't know how I'm going to get out of here. I'm trying to move. I can't move. I'm like blacking out because it hurts so much. Luckily, the ski patroller doing his sweep at the end of the day had stopped on the hill just above me, and he was lighting a cigarette, and I saw the guy and I yelled for him, and luckily he had stopped there, because otherwise I probably would have been there all night, probably just frozen to death. I was starting to get covered in snow. And he looks down, he goes, "Geez, man, what are you doing there?" I said, "I've done something to my shoulder. I can't get up. So anyway, he phones up the dock. The dock comes up in a snowmobile. They get stuck about 100 meters down the hill in the snowmobile. So the dock can't get to me. I don't got no gas or any type of like painkiller. So they bring the meat cart down from above. They slap me in the meat cart. Problem is, I'm in like a starfish situation. So I got to get my broken shoulder from here to here, and then get me in the meat cart, strap me up, get me down to the dock. So anyway, they finally get me in. I'm screaming, crying. This is horrible, like so much pain. They bounce me down to the dock, and the doc goes, "Oh, no problem. He's just got a dislocated shoulder." So he puts his boot in my underarm, and he's reefing on my arm, trying to put it back in. And I'm screaming like, no, it's not dislocated. Stop. So anyway, they give me a bit of gas, and I'm starting to feel a bit better. And they take me all the way down where I get a scanner in the hospital. And sure enough, it was broken. And the Whistler Medical Clinic, she had my mom on speed dial between me and my 3 brothers. So they called up, "Yeah, Mrs. Cudmore." Yes, it's us again at the medical clinic. "Yeah, oh, this time?" "No, it's Jamie. Yeah, he's broken his shoulder." So mom had come pick me up, and I had the arm in the brace for the next kind of 6 weeks.
Never judge a man for smoking, though, will you? You'll never judge a man for smoking.
No, never. That's right.
I feel quite sick after hearing that. And if anything highlights the difference between Jamie Cudmore, one of the hardest men to ever play rugby, and obviously one of the finest skiers in Canada, and Alex Payne, who potted around snow ploughing on the nursery slopes. Jamie, sometimes less is more in life, and I will leave that as a profound note on which to finish. Listen, it's been really nice to catch up. I'm sorry that we've kind of been doing that over, a topic like concussion, but I know it is something that obviously is very passionate to you, and I hope you get the outcome you're looking for, and I hope that somehow there is good that comes out of all of this. Have a happy Christmas in the meantime, and good luck with Canada. It's been really nice to catch up. We will hopefully speak again soon. Well done, Tins. Nice to chat to you.
Cheers, James.
And I think we've probably got more stories to come from this as well, which we will follow, of course. And thank you to Kat for dropping in as well. I'm sorry we didn't get quite as long with Kat as we were hoping for, but always good to check in with an England World Cup winner. Just before we go, we did also want to pop one other little line out there, which is that off the back of the show that we did around Christophe Dominici the other day with Ben Kayser, we have been absolutely inundated with messages from a number of you who said that you were very touched by it. And in many ways, you also had been through some of the issues that we were talking about. And with that in mind, we did actually want to do something about it. So if you go to our website, which is www.goodbadrugby.com, we have put up a whole load of what we hope are useful links to people who have got phone numbers and ears to listen to, or to listen to you, I should say. So if you are struggling, if you're looking for a little bit of help, if you're looking for some guidance, advice, etc., then head to the website, and we've put some links up there which we hope will be of use. If you've been affected by anything in the show that was based around the life and times of Christophe Dominici, or perhaps in this one as well, head there, and hopefully some support networks are available for you. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Be good to yourselves. We'll see you in 7 days' time for our Yuletide special. What are we getting new? Are we getting new suits this year?
Yeah. I actually need to get on the suits.
You
yes,
do.
We will.
New suits this year. We may even be singing a rendition of Archie Curzon's bid for Christmas #1. I can only apologise in advance. It is absolutely god awful. But the one thing about it is that it is raising valuable money for Restart Rugby. If you've got a spare quid down the back of the sofa, do head to Amazon, type in "It's Christmas time, it's time to lash." Can't even believe I'm saying these words. It's absolutely appalling, but it is money being raised for a very good cause. So Curzon, you remain an idiot, but you are doing great things for rugby players in this part of the world. Details across all our social channels to come this week as well. I won't be watching any of it. Jamie, once again, look after yourself and your family. Speak to you very soon. Tins, love and hugs to the fam. Over to you, Rob Brydon. See you in 7 days' time. Bye for now.